Okay, guys, welcome to day 172 of Bible 365. I am your host, Kathy Carter, and I'm back and I'm losing shade really quickly. So I'm going to try and get this done in a relatively decent amount of time, but there is so much reading going on. So for those of you who have never been here before, Bible 365 means we are reading through the Bible in 1 year, 365 days. And I am using a chronological Bible reading plan, which means we are reading it from beginning to end, right, every page, but we're going in a historical order to help us make a little bit more sense out of God's story. So it's not just stories, but it is all one piece and one unit and one story together. I'm thinking that's going to help us understand God a little bit better and be able to put in what our faith means and how that works in our life. So today, again, I said is 172. It is June 20th on your calendar. And so our reading is 2 Kings 13:12 through 15:5. And it's jumbled, but it's a little bit of that. And then 2 Chronicles 25 through 26:21. And then the entire book of Jonah. And I could just spend the entire time on the entire book of Jonah. But unfortunately, that's not what our reading is about. And so we'll have to do that at another time. But for now, we're doing this big chunk of reading today. And I'm going to go back to the beginning. Because reading Jonah, I feel like even puts this entire reading in perspective. Okay. So June 20th, let's get started right away. Remember, we're in the time of Kings. And so it was David, it was Solomon, and then the kingdom split in two. Lower kingdom Judah, upper kingdom Israel. We have a lot of new kings today, and I'm going to introduce them, but then I'm going to put them on the board tomorrow because I didn't want to waste time with the board today. So let's just meet who we're meeting today. We have not had a lot of great kings, and we're not going to have a lot of more great kings at this point. So here we go. We are in 2 Kings 14, and we're starting in verse 1. In the second year of Jehoash, son of Jehoahaz, king of Israel, Amaziah, son of Joash, king of Judah, began to reign. And I do that really slow because the names are really tough, so in order to understand who they are. Okay, so in the second year of Jehoash, he is the king of Israel, and now we have Amaziah is now becoming the king of Judah. He was 25 years old when he became king. He reigned 29 years. And it says he did what was right in the eyes of the Lord. So once again, down in Judah, in David's descendants, we have a king who is following and who loves and follows the Lord. All right, so he does this, but it says, not as his father David had done. In everything, he followed the example of his father Joash. So he's not quite what David was, which lends us to wonder kind of like, what was David, right? Like we did the books of 1st and 2nd Samuel and into the book of Chronicles, 1st Chronicles. And so we learned a lot about David. And so what was it about David? David sinned. We know that David sinned. Now, we know he was not a perfect man, right? We know, if we're going light, we know that he did the census, all right? So we know that there were things that he did that weren't right. But we also know that he he took a woman that wasn't his, that was married to one of his warriors, and he may or may not have raped her, but what we do know is he had sex with her, and he created a baby with her, and then he brought the guy back that was her husband and tried to pretend that that baby was his. And when that didn't work, he killed that husband, Uriah the Hittite. So we know that he did some really low down, dirty stuff. But what we also know, and what God says over and over and over and over again, is David was a man after God's heart. So even when David did these wretchedly awful things, when he was called on those things, he repented, right? And he sought the Lord. He accepted his punishments. So yes, he doesn't live a perfect life. And we have to be clear on that. I don't want you guys to forget that David was a sinful man, right? He was not perfect. He was not the perfect lamb. He was sinful. And so he did some wrong things and he was punished for it. But consistently, he did all the things. He prayed, he fasted, and he repented. That we saw those things very consistent in David's life, and he turned back to him. And what I even think is funny, because we're going to go into Jonah, and I'm discovering more and more, and we're in this time where a lot of pastors are like falling in disgrace in some ways, right? Like, so even if we go with some big ones like Carl Lentz or Ravi Zacharias, right? What we want to see, right, is we don't want to see a perfect pastor. That's just unrealistic. Like, so as a congregant, as a member, as somebody that follows Christ, that's not what I'm looking for. What I'm looking for is a man, a leader after the Lord's heart. Right? And how I would know that that's true is not by his perfect outward behavior, but by I see him repenting. I see him being honest. I see him turning to the Lord. I know that he's fasting. I know that he's in prayer, right? I can't tell you how many churches I go to that prayer is not the first thing on their list. Like, if anything, it's actually the last thing on their list. And I don't want to downplay music at all, because I love music in a service. And I love, for me, music brings me closer to the Lord. So I love contemporary worship music. But like, if that's the thing that you spend the most time and energy on, you're missing these other ways to bring you to the Lord, right? And we need to bring in all of those things. So again, a call out to all of us as anyone who leads and is in maybe the public or is in front of people or is ministering to people. What we need to be is more like David, right? Obviously more like Jesus. That goes without question, but we haven't gotten that far yet. So this is what he says. So he follows, so he's not like David, right? David does some awesome things in honoring the Lord. All right, so he doesn't remove the high places though. So that's one of the things that we see about him. And then in verse 5, it says, after the kingdom was firmly in his grasp, he executed the officials who had murdered his father, the king. So seems really bad. And his father was murdered because he wasn't doing really good things. And so he was murdered for that. However, this is what he does according to the law of Moses. So he kills those who assassinated the king, but he doesn't kill their entire family. And that's according to the law of Moses. So we see that he was good and he did those things. Now, I want to move down to 2 Chronicles 25, 1 through 24, because I feel like this has a better version. Better is always the wrong word. It has more details, right, in this version of the story. So here we go. So it says in verse 5 in 2 Chronicles 25, Amaziah called the people of Judah together and assigned them according to their families. So once again, here we go. He's bringing all of those rules and accordances and all of those. He's bringing all the decrees and all the things back that were originally instituted by Moses. And so he's bringing those things back. Moses, then Joshua, then David and Solomon. And so he's bringing all those things back, and then he brings back his army, and he brings back an army as well. So he kind of puts together this army. And then in verse 7 it says, but a man of God came to him and said, Your Majesty, these troops from Israel must not march with you. So he brought together all of these troops, but he also brought in some of the troops of Israel, and Israel was not following the Lord. So this man of God comes in and he says, you got to get rid of these troops. And then the king's like, how am I going to win, essentially? And he said, God will overthrow you before the enemy, for God has the power to help or to overthrow. So Amaziah then dismisses the troops that had come to him from Ephraim. He sends them home. And then they were super mad, and then they did dirty things. So it says the troops that Amaziah had sent back had not allowed, that he didn't allow to take part in the war. They raided the towns of Judah and Samaria, and then they killed 3,000 people. So they did the wrong things on the way home because they were frustrated. They were furious with Judah. Verse 13 it says, verse 14 it says, when Amaziah returned from slaughtering the Edomites, he brought back the gods of the people of Seir. So God helped him do all of these things. He followed that man of God who told him to get rid of these guys. And then once he destroys the Edomites, he brings their gods back down to Judah. And then he starts to follow those gods. Verse 15, the anger of the Lord burned against Amaziah. And then he sent him another prophet who said, why do you consult this people's gods, which could not save their people from you? So we all think we're super logical, right? Like if I ask probably any of you who are listening, you would probably all say, you think really logically, right? Like, I don't just listen to any news report. I follow up and I do my research and I do all these things, right? And yet we see time and time and time again how illogical we really are, right? One, I'm going to say we're super easily manipulated. But two, like, God is saying to him, you defeated Edom because of me. And now you're going to bring those gods down to follow them? When we put it out there and we're somebody on the outside who looks at it, we're like, that's completely absurd. But for someone on the inside, for whatever reason, he couldn't see that truth. And he thought that bringing in, maybe he thought bringing in extra gods, like, oh, the more gods I have on my side, the better. But whatever it is, he's thinking illogically. The Lord, the God that has created all and everything, has been with him and has helped him through this war and has saved him. And instead he's going to go, yeah, I'm going to take some lesser gods also. Like, it just doesn't make any sense. And yet we see it happen time and time and time again. So then, so this man of God says this to him. And then the prophet and the king gets super mad, and he says, kind of like, who made you leader of the people? He said, why be struck down? So he's threatening to kill him. So the prophet stopped speaking, and then he said, essentially, you're going to be destroyed, right? This is going to be your doom. So after that, because he didn't listen to the prophet. So after that, then Amaziah goes to the king of Israel, to, I think it's Jehoash at the time. Yeah, so he goes to Jehoash and he says, hey, let's go to battle. Again, I'm not too sure what made him decide that this was the right path to take, but Jehoash says, it's because you're prideful. So Jehoash gives him this little parable, and he's essentially like, right, this little thistle to the big cedar of Lebanon. Now, I think that Israel is the little cedar and Judah is the big cedar in Lebanon. That's what I feel like I've gathered. So it seems like Jehoash sent the daughter to marry the son of Judah, right? And so they're intertwined by marriage. And he said, and now you're going to come and you're going to step on me. Like, why do you want to do that? That's what I think that it says, although it could be opposite. But that's what I think it says. And then it says in verse 20, Amaziah, however, won't listen. For God so worked that he might deliver them into the hands of Jehoash, because they sought the gods of Edom. So he attacked, and then they wound up losing. And it says in verse 23, Jehoash, king of Israel, captured Amaziah, king of Judah. And then Jehoash brought him to Jerusalem, broke down the walls of Jerusalem, and stole all their stuff, kind of like plundered all their goods, everything in the treasury. So then we move on to 2 Kings 13. And then it says, we're going to now go into Joash's death. So it says, Jehoash rested with his fathers, his ancestors, and Jeroboam, this is the second Jeroboam, succeeded him on the throne. Jehoash was buried in Samaria with the kings of Israel. So now we have a new king of Israel, Jeroboam II, as king of Israel. Moving on to 2 Kings 14:23, in the 15th year of Amaziah, son of Joash, king of Judah, Jeroboam, son of Jehoash, king of Israel, becomes king in Samaria and reigns 41 years. He did evil in the sight of the Lord and didn't turn away from any of the things of Jeroboam. Although it does say, so they're kind of giving a little bit of credit here. Because I like this too. Like, this is again why I feel like, I know I mentioned it yesterday, this is why I feel like the Bible is so truthful, because it gives you both goods and bads. It doesn't just say like he was evil and then like all horrible things happened to him, or he was so good and then the kingdom prospered and everything was wonderful. It really lays out for you some good and some bad, right? But overall the message is who did and who didn't follow the Lord, right? It's not necessarily about what they gained or lost, but it is who did and who didn't follow the Lord. Okay, so one of the things that he did do, he restored the boundaries of Israel from Lebo Hamath to the Dead Sea in accordance with the word of the Lord. So he did do, so some of the things that the Lord told him to do, he did do, right? And he gained some land back. And he did this through his servant Jonah, who we're going to meet in a little bit. So the prophet Jonah was sent to tell him what to do, and he did these things. So because of Jonah, the prophet, God gave him the word. Jonah went to them, told them what to do, and they regained a lot of territory in Israel because of that. All right, moving on, it says, Amaziah, son of Joash, king of Judah, lived for 15 years after the death of Jehoash, son of Jehoaz, king of Israel. Verse 27, from the time that Amaziah turned away from following the Lord, they conspired against him in Jerusalem, and he fled to Lachish, but then they sent after him to kill him there. So he was brought back by horse and was buried by with his ancestors in the city of Judah. It says in verse 21, the people of Judah took Azariah, who was 16 years old, and made him king in the place of his father, Amaziah. He was the one who rebuilt Elath and restored it to Judah after Amaziah rested with his ancestors. Are you with me so far? Okay, so far we are, I'm just taking a quickie look at my notes. So far in Judah, the king was Ahaziah, Athaliah was the mom, remember that? Then Joash, then Amaziah, and then Azariah, who is also Uzziah. I know, getting a little messy, right? So they were the kings in Judah by the end of today. The kings in Israel by the end of today were Jehu, Jehoahaz, Jehoash, and Jeroboam II. So I'm hoping you're kind of with me so far. Lots of names, lots of stuff to keep in order. If you're trying to keep it in order, you might just be skimming. So here we go. So we're talking about Uzziah, who again is Azariah. He's in Judah. He was 16 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem for 52 years. So he had a huge and long reign. He did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, just as his father had done. Now, his father, remember, turned at the end, but mostly he had done what was right in the eyes of the Lord. He did keep high places, however. And then in verse 5, it says, the Lord afflicted the king with leprosy, and we're going to see that happen until the day he died. And then he lived separate. So we're going to see that story in just a little bit. But we go to 2 Chronicles 26, it says, this kind of repeat that they took Uzziah. And then Uzziah was 16 when he became king. He reigned for 52 years. And in verse 5, it says, he sought God during the days of Zechariah, who instructed him in the fear of the Lord. So Zechariah was, I'm assuming, a prophet or a priest. And he had the ear of the king, and he was teaching him to fear the Lord. As long as he sought the Lord, God gave him success. I actually want to talk about this a little bit, because the next verse, it says, he went to war against the Philistines. Success is something that we think in our eyes, right? Like, so I know as you're sitting there as a listener, you're wondering, what is success to you, right? Like a visual of what is success. And we read this and then go, oh, good, he was successful because he followed the Lord. But then immediately after it says he goes to war, right? Does that mean he's successful in war? It will mean that, but what does that mean to you, right? Like, what does success look like? And so I want to kind of pull out 3 different kings and discuss their success, because success has everything to do with following the Lord and nothing to do with anything in particular. So like, let me make that make more sense. Success isn't college degree, good job, nice house, good kids, everyone goes to church, right? Like, that's not, in God's eyes, that doesn't necessarily equal success. Now, it could, by the way, like for you, that might be success, but that's not the definition of success. So if we define success by the Lord, it would really be anything when you follow the Lord the way that the Lord blesses you, right? That would be success in the eyes of the Lord, because they're following the Lord. So it's different for everyone. Like David, for example, he was successful in the eyes of the Lord, but he was also at war. And now if we're at war, right, if we're a country that's at war, like I'm just thinking about the war-torn countries that we have surrounding us right now, and I'm sure they wouldn't find themselves to be successful, right? Like there are people that are dying. That's just a reality, right? It might not be massive numbers, but there are people that are dying. There are people that are starving because money that was allocated to go a certain place is now allocated to go a different place. So being in war in general wouldn't seem like a successful thing, right? But what's happening is like, so for David, when David was at war, right? He was at war because he was bringing all the nations together, and everybody around them was trying to kill them. So success meant that the Lord was with him in all of his battles against all of these kingdoms, right? So that was success for David. Success for Solomon was different, because Solomon, because of his father, lived in a time of peace. So success for Solomon was a peaceful land with massive amounts of financial gain and wisdom in abundance. That was success for Solomon. And now for him, for this guy, which is, it's Uzziah. So for Uzziah, what we see success again is the Lord being with him in his endeavors. When people come against him, the Philistines come against him and other nations are coming against them to battle them, that they are successful in their battles. When they try to go back out and go get their land, right, that was once theirs, that was taken from them, the Lord is with them and they are successful in their battles. So I only want to kind of dig that in, because I think we brush past this idea of success and we recreate in our own minds what success might mean. And so I think we have to pull away from our traditional idea of success and really hone in on what God would have us be successful at. For you, it might be that you go out on a mission for the next 5 years, right? Like that might be successful because you're following what the Lord tells you to do, right? For you, it might be starting a church. And starting at the bottom and working your way up. It might be leaving your job, right? Like, so there are different definitions of what's successful because it's what the Lord asks you to do and how you follow through on those things. And then he will have you be successful in those things. I don't know if that helps at all or if I just muddied the situation, but I think it was important to note because consistently through time, we always seem to define it in our own way and through our own vision of what we want success to look like. And so like we have these goals of like, I want this in my bank account and I want my kid to go to this kind of school and I want health, wealth, and happiness, right? And so, or like our nation's definition of success, right? The right to darn if I don't know it, and I know I just watched the whole thing shake, to pursue happiness, right? To pursue love and happiness or whatever. And that's not God's definition of success. So we have to pull our vision back to what God wants for us to be successful. So if you are in this time in your life and you're hearing God say these things, but it looks opposite of what you think is comfortable for you or what you think defines success, I ask you just to listen to what the Lord is saying, right? And to follow him because he's going to make you successful in that. Whatever that looks like, right? He's going to make you successful because that's what he wants for you. Right? That's his overriding guide for you. And that's how he wants you to be successful. So that's what he does for you. Okay. Again, moving on from that, but that was my soapbox for today. Okay. And the way that this guy is successful is God helps him against the Philistines, the Arabs, the Meunites, and then the Ammonites kind of come and bring him everything because at this point he's just conquering territory left and right. He has 307,500 men trained for war. So he's kind of got all this package together. And then in the bottom verse, it says his fame spread far and wide, for he was greatly helped until he became powerful. So we're going to see a change once he becomes powerful, because what happens is when we become powerful, pride tends to get in our way. Verse 16, but after Uzziah became powerful, his pride led to his downfall. He was unfaithful to the Lord his God and entered the temple of the Lord to burn incense on the altar, to burn on the altar of incense. Okay, if you guys were with me back in Leviticus and Deuteronomy, if you weren't, I strongly encourage you to go back. But if you were, you will remember that, oh my goodness, Aaron's sons, Moses' brother, Aaron's sons were instantaneously killed when they went to burn incense at the altar and they were not supposed to, which feels unjust. This guy is not a priest. He is not a Levite. He is not supposed to be setting foot in that temple. And so he, through his pride, thinks that he's something he's not, takes on a position he is not supposed to take on, and the Lord pays him back for it. So he goes in to do this. The priests come in like screaming, like, get out, you do not belong here. He's angry. He doesn't even listen to them. And then God immediately gives him leprosy, which again, I've talked to you guys about leprosy. It's a death sentence. It's at least at the very most, it's a sentence of solitude, right? Like no one wants to be near you because it's highly contagious. It is awful and nobody wants it. It's really, really painful. And so at the very least, what we see at the end of his life now is he is alone because he's a leper. He has to live in a different house. And then his son has to start ruling the kingdom because of that. So it was a bad punishment. But this is what he let happen because he thought that he was something he wasn't. So that's how we end. I'm not ending today, but that's how we end sort of this section of Kings. And now we're coming into the book of Jonah. And again, I want to talk about this forever. I can't. I can only talk about it for a couple of minutes. Jonah was a prophet that we just saw, right? We just met Jonah, and he was during, I'm going to go back to it. So if we go to, he was Jeroboam. So if we go back to 2 Kings 14, he was a prophet during the time of Jeroboam being the king. He was a prophet in Israel, in the northern kingdom of Israel, right? And so God gives him a job. Now, it says, the word of the Lord came to Jonah, son of Amittai. This is what the Lord says. Go to the great city of Nineveh and preach against it, because its wickedness has come up before me. Okay, he's here, like, right? He's here, he's in Israel, right? Nineveh is like way over here, what is now like modern day Iraq. I'm pretty sure it's right here in Iraq. And so it's way over here. So it's uncomfortable. Here we go with success, right? He doesn't want to do this for any number of reasons. Not only are they way over here, but they don't love the Lord, right? Israelites in general, people want to war against them, right? Like no one's like, oh yeah, let's be besties. They're either serving under them because they're scared that they're going to lose wars, or they are fighting against them and they're trying to take their territory. There's really not necessarily an in-between. So he's going to this land where it says its wickedness has come up before the Lord. So what we know is they don't follow the Lord. They probably don't like Israel. And they're wicked, right? They're so wicked that the Lord has seen them, right? And it's come up against the Lord. So he tells this prophet, who has already gone and spoken some prophecies, right? He's already spoken to the king of Israel. This is what I want you to do. I want you to go here. Head over to Nineveh. He says, not going to do it. And he goes to Tarshish instead. So again, all the way over, which I think is like in modern day Spain. I don't know if they're 100% sure, but Israel's here. Tarshish way over here. Nineveh's way over here, right? So he's like, I'm not going. Fine. He decides he's not going to go. He jumps on a ship. He gets on that ship. As soon as he gets on that ship, everything is the way, I don't know if everyone knows this story, but the waves come crashing in and people are all freaking out. They're all trying to pray to their gods, right? Like, what's happening? What's going on? And Jonah is essentially like, that was me. But before he does that, and I just like the nerve of him. So it says all the sailors were afraid. All these things are going on. And then it says, but Jonah, right? So they're all afraid. They're freaking out. The ship is going here and there. But Jonah goes below deck where he lays down and he fell into a deep sleep. He's not like lightly sleeping. He's falling into a deep sleep down below deck. I have like a picture of this in my head. So he's falling into a deep sleep downstairs. And then they cast lots and they all figure out the problem is Jonah, right? And then Jonah says, what have you done? Pray to your God. And he's like, I'm a God of the Hebrews. It's my Lord. And essentially I wasn't supposed to do what I wanted, what I was told to do. And then he says, pick me up and throw me into the sea. So this is his alternative, right? He doesn't pray. He says, pick me up and throw me into the sea because this is all my fault. Now you think to yourself, oh, he's giving himself up to the Lord. So if you can tell, I have issues with Jonah. Jonah is exactly like the people of Israel, right? Nowadays, people like us. Jonah is told by God to do something. Jonah says, I'm not doing that. I'm going that way, even though I know you're God. Even though I know what you've done. I know the power of you, because later we see, he goes, I know you were going to do that. So he knows the power of God. But he's like, I'm not going there. I know that's what I'm supposed to do. I'm going to go there. I'm going to try and hide from you. Like he can hide from God. He knows he can't hide from God. And then as everything is battering against him, so God's making it extremely obvious. Hey, I'm here. You're supposed to be going that way. You're going this way. What are you doing? What's happening? He goes and he hides and he goes to sleep. He gets himself into a deep sleep. So he's like, la, 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 I can't hear you. Don't send me there. I'm not going there. I'm going to sleep. Like, if it doesn't embody everything that Israel did, Israel's like, I'm not going to follow you. I'm going to go my own way. And God is like, here I am. Here are the wars. I'm going to do good when you follow me. I'm going to punish you when you don't. They're still like, la, la, la. They dig their heels in. And they're like, I'm still not following you. Just like it took Uzziah getting hit with leprosy before he would decide to go back and listen to the Lord. So do you see, like, God shows us these pictures all the time. If it is not evident to you guys, please sit back and listen. Okay. Then he chooses, I would rather die than do what the Lord asked me to do. Just end it for me. I'd rather die. Like, just follow the Lord. I know it's not easy. Just follow the Lord. He said, I'd rather die. Then they're like, no, please. We don't want the Lord to be mad at us. But overall, they said the ship is still doing all these things, and so they have to throw him in the sea. Lord, please don't punish us for throwing your prophet into the sea. Throws him in the sea. He gets swallowed by a fish. Fine. Here we are in Jonah 2. He's swallowed by a fish. He has nerve right here. He says, in my distress, I called out to the Lord. So now here he is. He's in a really bad place. He's in the belly of a fish. Believe it, don't believe it. God can do amazing miracles. He's in the belly of a fish. And he says, yet I will look again toward your holy temple. So now he's in distress, and now he's crying out to the Lord, and he's like, I'm going to look towards you now. You, Lord, you brought my life up from the pit. When my life was ebbing away 3 days inside the belly of a whale, I remembered you, Lord, and my prayer rose to you, to your holy temple. Those who cling to worthless idols turn away from God's love for them. So I'm saying this in a sarcastic tone because of what happens in the future. So he says all these things. And here we go. Verse 10, then the Lord commanded the fish, and it vomits Jonah onto dry land. So they were out in the middle of the water. That fish comes to dry land, coughs him up on dry land. Super. Says to him again, verse 1 in Jonah 3, go to the great city of Nineveh and proclaim it the message I give to you. There was never a promise, by the way. All he said was, go there, proclaim that they are wicked, and I'm going to destroy them. That's all he tells them to do. He doesn't say, I'm going to save them, or I love them, or I want them to turn to me. He doesn't say any of that. There's no promise that what Jonah is going to do is going to work out well, right? One way or the other, it's going to work out well. So in verse 3, you go, okay, Jonah obeys the word of the Lord, and he goes into Nineveh. And now Nineveh was a very large city. It took 3 days to go through it. Jonah began by going a day's journey into the city, proclaiming, 40 more days and Nineveh will be overthrown. That's all he proclaims. 40 more days. So he goes in, he's only a day in. 40 more days, Nineveh's going to be overthrown. Now, I don't know if he did it forever. He kept doing it, or if he just did it at one time. That's kind of all we see. Boom. Ninevites are like, what? We're praying, we're fasting, we're covering ourselves in ashes, we're in sackcloth. The king's like, what? We're praying, we're fasting, we're covering ourselves in sackcloth. We are all turning to the Lord. It says, let everyone, this king says, do not let people or animals, herds or flocks taste anything. Do not let them eat or drink, but let people and animals be covered with sackcloth. Let everyone call urgently on God. Let them give up their evil ways and their violence. Who knows? God may yet relent and with compassion turn from his fierce anger so we will not perish. Once again, now here again, second time we see someone's going to do something. So Jonah was sent to do something with not knowing if it was going to come true or not. He decided he wasn't going to do it. The king was given a message and he says, I'm going to pray anyway. We might still get overthrown in 40 days. He doesn't turn to other gods. He doesn't say, God, we demand that you do this. We'll follow you if you will, right? He doesn't do any of those things. He just lays himself down, gives himself over to the Lord, and says, whatever will be, right? Whatever you have in store for us, we're going to accept it, right? Because they accept that they have been wicked. And so they're turning back to the Lord. Verse 10, though, here's God. When God saw what they did and how they turned from their evil ways, he relented and didn't bring on destruction to them. So Jonah gets super mad. So a very quick end of the story, because I'm so far in, it's ridiculous. Very quick end of the story. Jonah is furious, and you think to yourself, why would he be mad? People are saved. Seems awesome. But he's furious, and he said, God, kill me. Take away my life. I'm done. And God's like, is it right for you to be angry? And he's like, I knew you were going to do this. I knew you were going to have compassion on them, and you were going to turn them. Before I even left, I knew that this was going to happen. So then he goes and he sits down, he's kind of pouting, and he's waiting to see what happens. And then God sprouts this thing up, this flower, essentially, like I think a sunflower, comes up, gives him shade. He's so happy. I'm under shade. It was super hot. And then he sends a worm. The worm withers the sunflower, and the sunflower winds up dying. And then here we go. He's mad again. And we're going again with God asking him, I lost my page. God asking him why he's mad and if he has the right to be mad. So God says to Jonah, is it right for you to be angry about the plant? And Jonah says, it is. I'm so angry, I wish I were dead. So Jonah has still not learned his lesson, so to speak. The Lord says, you've been concerned about this plant, though you didn't do anything for this plant, right? So like you have all these concerns about this plant. By the way, it was helping him. So his concerns about the plant were of a selfish nature. But he's like, you didn't tend it, but you were concerned about this plant. Grew up and it died overnight. Should I not have concern for Nineveh? There are more than 120,000 people in there who can't tell their right hand from their left. Like what he's saying is that like they didn't know, and I sent you. Like they didn't. They couldn't tell that they were being wicked. I sent you. Do you care more about this plant that was shading you than about all of these people in the land that are now getting to live because you went and told them that they were wicked, and so I saved them, right? Like, I feel like Jonah never follows the Lord in this. I feel like he sticks in his ways, and it makes me think of all of those people who consider and call themselves Christians, and they say, well, what about the one who doesn't proclaim the Lord? Like, what about the thief on the cross? What about the one who doesn't proclaim the Lord until they're dying? Does it matter? Is the Lord not allowed to bless them as much as they blessed you? Is following the Lord a curse, or is it a blessing? When you follow the Lord, will he give you success, or will he give you failure? Right? So when we think of those things, again, our concerns are ourselves, and the Lord calls us to love on other people. That is what we are called to do. That's the way that we love on other people, by giving them the word of the Lord and allowing them to choose to turn to the Lord, right? No matter what they have done, no matter how they have hurt us, right? No matter how wicked we think they are. So that is what we are called to do as followers of God and of Christ, right? That's how I'm ending today. I hope this was helpful to you. I hope it was a blessing. I know it was really long, and I appreciate if you stuck with me. If this was a blessing, like it, share it, subscribe to the channel, guys. Keep reading. I'll see you next time.